Today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in KeyForge. This is my deck of KeyForge. I played it for the first time, twice for the first time on Wednesday, and I had a really good time with it. I wasn't sure, as much as I love the unique elements of this game, which I'll mention in a second, I wasn't sure if I'd actually like it, but I had a lot of fun playing it. And I was a little surprised by how much I want to continue to play this one deck. Like, I really want to get to know this one deck. I have a sense of ownership over it, and I want to get good at it. See, that's the one thing I want to mention about this game. This isn't a mechanism, but if you have heard of KeyForge, you've probably heard of the unique element of it, which is that my deck was randomly, well, not randomly generated. The name was randomly generated. No other deck has this name, and this is on the back of every card in my deck. My deck has a combination of 3 different factions and an assortment of cards from each of those factions. I think there are about 350 cards possible in KeyForge, and I have 36 of them in this deck, as well as this little reference card. So my favorite mechanism in the game is that there are no costs to play anything. This is so odd and really weird almost to see in a game where you are playing cards on a table and going against your opponent. This is the huge hook about this game, aside from the unique element of it. When on my turn, say I have a hand of these cards, you can see the faction icons in the upper right. Here we go. Here are the 3 factions. So say I have these cards in hand. You can see those faction icons up here. On my turn, I choose one faction to activate. And that is the only faction that I can pretty much do anything with that turn. So that means that if I want to play cards for that faction, I can do so. I don't have to pay cost. I have to ignore all the other cards of other factions, but I get to play any cards of the faction I choose. I can activate actions on cards in the chosen faction. So if I don't know if I have any actions here. No actions on these cards, but I can activate them. I can attack with cards of that faction, but not the other one. So I have these other cards that are sitting out there on the table. They're not doing anything. I can attack with these cards, and I can reap with these cards, which means that I can essentially tap it to get a crystal, an ember crystal, and those crystals move you towards winning the game. And the last thing you can do, actually, this is one of the coolest things, I think. At the end of your turn, you can discard any cards of that faction, again, only of that specific faction, and to help you fill your hand with other cards, because you always draw back up to 6 cards. So lots of interesting choices within each faction, but the choice as to which faction you choose is really, really interesting and difficult at times. Because you might have, on my previous turn, I may have played a lot of cards of the Untamed faction, so I may have a lot of Untamed cards on the table, but I don't have many Untamed cards to play in my hand. And so I'm trying to decide, okay, is it worth me keeping my hand a secret and not being able to discard or refill or change my hand because I can only discard cards of the Untamed faction? Or do I use my nice table spread that I have of a lot of Untamed cards on the table? Do I use that right now since they're already there? But an overarching all of this is the fact that there are no costs. And I would suggest once you finish this video, just think about that for a bit, because it is so awesome. Like it is really, really clever that you are not paying cost to play these cards. You are choosing which faction to play and playing cards from that faction or doing things with that faction. It's a brilliant workaround, because this is one of the problems with many not problems. It's one of the limitations of many other card games, and pretty much any other like Euro game has cost in it. But in this game, it says, no, we don't have cost anymore. You don't have to think about that. You don't have to gather resources to pay cost. You don't have to manage your mana. You don't have to choose one card over the other because one costs more, one costs less. Instead, you have any of these cards that you can play at any time as long as you have chosen that faction. And that leads to so many really, really interesting choices, both in terms of the design and also in the game when you're actually playing it. That's my favorite mechanism, among some other really clever stuff in terms of like attacking, like how that interacts with the game, how that impacts the game, because you're not taking out someone's life in this game. You are trying to forge keys using those ember crystals that I mentioned. But that, even as clever as that is, as clever as the unique game element is, I think it's all secondary to this cost thing, which is just really, really interesting and brilliant. That's my favorite mechanism in KeyForge. If you have a different mechanism you'd love to talk about, or if you'd just like to share the name of your deck, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. And if you have any other games that use anything like this, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this, where you don't care about cost, but you are still limited in many ways throughout the game. I'd love to hear about that in the comments as well. Thanks.